woods have a way of swallowing the truth. We step into national parks and forest trails looking for an escape, attracted by the quiet, the fresh air, and the absolute beauty of untamed nature. We follow the brightly painted trail markers, we pitch our tents in designated spots, and we believe that as long as we stay on the path, the civilized world is just a short walk away. But the deeper you walk into the forest, the more you realize that the path is just an illusion. Once the sun dips below the tree line and the shadows stretch across the forest floor, the woods transform. The familiar chirping of birds dies out, replaced by a suffocating heavy silence. You begin to realize that the rustling of leaves behind your tent isn't just a stray animal. You realize that 40 miles into the wilderness, there are no streetlights, no cell towers, and no police. My name is David, and tonight I am going to share 3 true accounts from people who walked into the deep woods and realized too late that they were being hunted by something that didn't want them to leave. Look out your window right now, listen closely to the quiet, because out in the dark, the trees are watching. Our first story comes from an experienced solo backpacker named Marcus. In the autumn of 2024, Marcus decided to complete a 4-day off-trail hike through a dense, federally protected wilderness area in northern Minnesota. Marcus loved the challenge of navigating using only a physical map and a compass, completely disconnected from technology. It was the 3rd evening of his trek. Marcus had pitched his tent in a small rocky clearing surrounded by ancient, tightly packed birch trees. The sun had set an hour ago, and the temperature was dropping rapidly toward freezing. Marcus was sitting inside his sleeping bag, reviewing his map by the light of his headlamp, when he heard a sound that made his spine go stiff. Marcus turned off his headlamp, plunging the tent into absolute darkness. He sat frozen, listening. The footsteps weren't erratic like a deer or heavy and shuffling like a black bear. They were bipedal, 2 feet, walking with a slow, deliberate cadence around the perimeter of his clearing. Step, pause, step, pause. Marcus reached into his pack and gripped his survival knife, his knuckles turning white. He waited for a call from a lost hiker, but nothing came. Just the heavy, rhythmic breathing of someone standing right outside his tent mesh. Suddenly, a bright flash of white light illuminated the entire clearing, piercing straight through the thin nylon of Marcus's tent. It lasted for a fraction of a second, followed by a mechanical click-whir sound. Someone had just taken a flash photograph of his tent in the dark. Marcus almost screamed. The pure psychological horror of being photographed by an unknown stalker in the middle of a blank wilderness paralyzed him. He didn't move. He didn't make a sound. 10 minutes later, the heavy footsteps slowly receded back into the thick brush, disappearing into the valley. Marcus didn't sleep a single second. At the first hint of gray morning light, he packed his tent in under 3 minutes and sprinted the 10 miles back to the nearest ranger station. When he reached the gravel parking lot, he noticed something sitting on the hood of his truck. It was a dusty, vintage analog Polaroid camera. Marcus approached the vehicle with a sinking feeling in his chest. Sticking out of the bottom of the camera was a single, developed photo. He pulled it out. The photo was taken from a high vantage point, looking down from a branch of a birch tree directly above his campsite. It showed Marcus inside his tent, visible through the top transparent ventilation mesh, fast asleep. But the terrifying part was the timestamp written in black marker on the border of the photo. 1:15 a.m., night 1. The stalker hadn't just found him on the third night. He had been climbing the trees above Marcus's head, tracking him and watching him sleep since the very first night he entered the woods. Our second account comes from a wildlife researcher named Sarah. In the summer of 2025, Sarah was tasked with setting up acoustic recording equipment in a remote, unmapped valley in Washington state to study owl migration patterns. She was dropped off by a helicopter with enough supplies for a 48-hour stay and was completely alone in a valley that hadn't seen human footprints in decades. On her first night, Sarah set up her base camp near a shallow rocky river. By midnight, she had donned her high-end noise-canceling headphones, which were connected to a highly sensitive parabolic directional microphone. This microphone allowed her to pick up sounds from up to 2 miles away in the forest. She was scanning the audio frequencies, listening to the distant wind, when she picked up a strange anomaly. Sarah adjusted the frequency dials. The whistling was clear. It wasn't an animal. It was a human voice whistling a specific, upbeat 1950s television commercial jingle, but it was coming from the deep, impenetrable thicket of the valley wall, an area covered in thick thorn bushes where no human could walk without a machete. She took off her headphones, listening with her bare ears. The forest was dead silent. The whistling was too quiet to hear without the amplified microphone. She put the headphones back on. The whistling had stopped. Now there was a voice. The parabolic microphone picked up the sound of someone whispering directly into the brush, less than 500 yards from her tent. The voice was repeating a single sentence over and over again, in a flat, monotone cadence. "She's listening now. Turn around." Sarah's blood turned to ice. The realization that whoever was out there knew she was using a directional microphone meant they were watching her through the dark with night vision or thermal scopes. Suddenly, through the headphones, she heard the sound of the brush exploding. Someone was sprinting through the thick thorns at incredible speed, heading directly toward her camp. Sarah threw the headphones off, grabbed her bear spray and her emergency satellite beacon, and ran blindly toward the rocky riverbed. She didn't look back. She stumbled through the freezing water, hiding beneath a large hollowed-out log on the opposite bank, burying herself under wet mud to mask her heat signature. She stayed there for 12 hours until the extraction helicopter returned the next afternoon. When the research team checked her base camp, her tent had been completely shredded into neat, vertical strips. Her expensive recording equipment was smashed to pieces, but the most disturbing detail was her headphones. They were sitting on top of a rock, plugged into the audio recorder. When the team pulled the digital audio log from the hard drive, they found that after Sarah ran away, the recorder continued to run for 6 hours. The audio file contained the sound of a man sitting by the microphone, continuously whistling that same cheerful 1950s jingle into the empty forest until the battery finally died at dawn. Our final account comes from a hunter named Ryan. In November of 2025, Ryan was tracking an elk through an unfamiliar section of a dense forest in northern Maine. He had pursued the animal deep into the wilderness, far past his usual hunting grounds, when a sudden heavy blizzard rolled in, dropping the visibility to less than 5 feet. Lost, freezing, and with night fast approaching, Ryan knew he wouldn't survive the night exposed to the elements. He began searching frantically for shelter when he stumbled upon an unmarked, ancient log cabin hidden inside a dense thicket of black spruce trees. The cabin wasn't on any topographical map. The roof was partially caved in, and the wooden door was swollen shut. Ryan used his shoulder to force the door open, slipping inside the dark, dusty interior. The cabin was empty, smelling heavily of damp earth and old rot. There was an old iron wood stove in the corner and a rusted metal frame of a bed. Ryan cleared a spot on the floor, started a small fire in the stove using dead twigs, and sat down to warm his freezing hands, keeping his hunting rifle across his lap. By 2 a.m., the blizzard outside was howling like a dying animal. Ryan was drifting off to sleep when he heard a metallic scratching sound coming from the center of the room. Ryan raised his rifle, aiming it at the stove. The heavy iron unit shifted completely to the side, revealing a dark, square opening in the stone floorboards beneath it, a hidden cellar. From the pitch-black darkness of the hole, a wooden ladder extended upward, its top rungs hooking onto the floor. Then, a hand reached out of the darkness and gripped the floorboards, but it wasn't a human hand. The fingers were impossibly long, covered in a thick, leathery black skin, with long, yellowed fingernails that looked like talons. The creature let go of the wood, tumbling back down into the dark cellar with a heavy thud. Ryan didn't wait to see if it was dead. He threw open the cabin door, bursting out into the freezing blizzard, preferring to face the deadly cold rather than stay in that room for another second. He walked through the blinding snow for 4 hours, his toes and fingers suffering severe frostbite, till he finally hit a logging road and was rescued by a passing truck. A month later, after recovering in the hospital, Ryan returned to the area with a team of local wardens to locate the cabin. They found the thicket of black spruce trees, but the cabin was completely gone. In its place was a massive, perfectly circular sinkhole in the earth, over 50 feet deep. When the wardens lowered a camera drone into the abyss, the footage showed that the entire bottom of the sinkhole was lined with thousands of old, rusted human keys, wallets, and worn-out hiking boots dating back over 50 years. The unmarked cabin hadn't been a shelter. It was a bait box. The next time you plan a trip into the deep woods, stick to the marked trails. Don't look into the shadows of the trees, and don't listen to the noises past your campfire, because once you step off the path, you become part of the forest's collection. Thank you for listening to the Dark Narrative. If you want to survive the next trek, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and turn on notifications. Sleep well, if the trees let you.